Well, welcome everybody. I am so excited for you to be here to experience our first in our series, our Lifting Voices series. So this series is meant to elevate the voices of those in communities that have typically been marginalized and whose stories have not been centered. And we want to put these stories front and center as our commitment to equity. And our first in the series is with our esteemed director of our TRiO program, Leo Villalobos. So I would like to introduce Leo to you before we get started. Leo has over 19 years of supporting and advocating for disproportionately impacted student groups. He's worked at CSU Long Beach as the TRiO Talent Search Program Assistant before transitioning to CSU Fullerton as the academic advisor for their talent search program. Taking his knowledge of recruitment and outreach programs, Leo continued his passion of college access programming to Volunteers of America, Los Angeles, where he served in multiple roles over 12 years. As director of Upward Bound from 2007 to 2011, and then director of Talent Search and Upward Bound between 2011 and 2019. And finally, senior program manager since September 2019. During his tenure at Volunteers of America, Leo strengthened the high school to college pipeline in the North Hollywood area with great success, demonstrating a 99% high school graduation rate and 90% post-secondary enrollment rate for program participants. We are extremely excited to have Leo joining the college, the student services team TRiO, to help us continue our commitment to college access and completion. And I want to welcome Leo as our first speaker in this series. Welcome, Leo.
Thank you. Very excited, very happy to be here.
So what we're going to do today is to have a conversation with Leo, and the intent of this conversation, again, is to center the stories of people who are representative, really, of our students, I have to say, and groups whose stories normally haven't been centered. So Leo has such an interesting story that I'm really excited to be able to bring it to you. So Leo, if it's okay, I'd like to get started by just asking you to take us back to your childhood and tell us a little bit about what that was like back when you were growing up well, you tell everybody where you were growing
Great.
up.
Yeah. So I was born in Mexico. I grew up in a very rural, very small town. There's about 800 people total population. So back when I was growing up, we didn't even have actual paved roads. It was dirt at some point. Eventually, they started putting pavers, rock pavers, and luckily we had running water. But when it came to like gas pipes and stuff like that, we didn't have access to that. So some households actually had to heat up the water like outdoors with wood or on the stove for those that had actually the capacity to have a stove at the house. So it was very, very small town. But, at that time growing up, I was very carefree. I think that's probably one of the times that I was the most unaware of how, I guess, undeserved or unprivileged I was. It didn't really seem to matter because, we were playing all the time. We would play with dirt. We making use a lot of our imagination. We will go out to the field and play. So those times are like probably one of the most memorable, just because it was so carefree again. And it was mostly, as I started getting older, started getting more awareness of kind of like my situation, and then realizing that, hey, there's really not a lot of educational future for us here. My parents didn't have an opportunity to go to school. My mom only had a second grade education, and my dad only had a sixth grade education. And not because they were not capable of going to school, it's just they didn't have the opportunity. My grandparents on my mom's side were very old school, very old fashioned, and they didn't believe that a woman should get educated because she was just going to be a housewife, right? And on my dad's side, my dad had a pretty bad childhood. His dad passed away when he was about 16. My grandfather was an alcoholic. He got killed over like gambling debts. It's just pretty bad story. And I actually like carry his name, which is not necessarily something that I'm proud of. So I always struggle with my name because of what it represents. I still don't know how or why they decided to name me after him, because he wasn't necessarily the best person, and it's always kind of been an issue for me having his name, especially because of the bad memories that it brings back, particularly to my grandma.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So growing up, you're in this, I love the way you framed it, which is you don't know that you're not privileged. All you know is your life, right? And what you have. And it sounds to me like you had a pretty carefree childhood. What is, can you talk about an experience during that time in Mexico that really shaped how you viewed the world as that carefree child?
Well, again, growing up, we didn't have much, and as I started getting older and started seeing that, especially during the holidays, right? Especially during Christmas time, or out there, we're really big on celebrating Dia de los Reyes, which is the Three Wise Men, on January 6th. And we normally wouldn't get presents in Christmas. Like that was more of like celebration, but it wasn't really like when we would get presents. So our tradition was to get the presents during January 6th. That's when we would, wake up and we'll have toys or stuff. But for us, it was usually a bag of cookies. That's what we would get for our presents, right? And we will go outside, and then all the kids in the neighborhood will be, pretty much parading all their gifts and stuff. Like some will have like remote control cars, brand new soccer balls, and I had a bag of cookies, right? But that's what parents could afford. And even though it wasn't much, like they did it with the heart, right? So that was always something that, even though we were poor money wise, I think in love we were super rich, right? So that's one of the things that always kind of kept us going. And come from a big family. I have 4 brothers and sisters. I'm the middle child. I'm right in the middle too, and I don't have that middle child syndrome, although my sisters say I do. But it's like it's my older brother, then my big sister, then me, then my little brother, then my little sister, and then myself. And I'm in between, right in the middle, because my brother is 5 years older than I am, and my little brother is 5 years younger than I am. My big sister is 4 years older than me. My little sister is 4 years younger than me. So I'm right in the smack of the middle. I don't know if my parents planned it that way, but it's very weird how that happened. But just growing up, I think it was, especially when I was going in school and started realizing that I wasn't going to have an educational future if I stayed in Mexico. I started realizing how much need we had. And then my dad was living in the US while we were staying back in Mexico. So I would only see my dad maybe twice a year whenever he had a break from work. So I didn't necessarily grow up with my parents. I grew up mostly with my grandma, because I had to take care of my grandma. My grandma was living by herself. So somebody had to be with her, and I was the chosen one.
So you referenced a little bit about leaving Mexico, and how old were you when your family moved to the U.S.?
I was around 14 years old when I moved to the U.S. And it was during a hard transition. I was growing up. I was becoming a teenager, and when I moved to the U.S., I didn't speak a word of English, and I came into a middle school, the first middle school I ever had to. Even though my teachers were supposed to be ESL, none of my teachers spoke Spanish, so I couldn't communicate with my teachers. I didn't even know how to ask permission to go to the restroom. So that was very hard at times, because I felt very incompetent. Growing up in Mexico and during the school, the 6 years that I went to school out there, I always get good grades. I was used to being like a high achieving student, but then I came here, and the English barrier just pretty much put a really damper on my motivation to want to continue to go to school. And I remember being in my middle school, and then a couple of weeks, I just couldn't take it anymore. I literally walked out of the middle school. I left. I got out, and no one stopped me. That was the first thing. I walked out of the classroom. I walked out in front of the front office, and I just went home. But I knew my mom wasn't gonna be happy with that, so I just kind of hung around the CVS that was close to our house until it was time for the school to be out, and then I would go home. But my mom was super smart, and she quickly realized like something was up. And then the next time that I tried to do that, she caught me. And that's when we had a really tough conversation as to why it was very important that I went to school, the sacrifices that my parents made for us to be here in this country, and sort of how, it was my job to go to school. And, she understood that it was difficult, but that I had really no choice. Like, you either go to school or you don't have a future. At least that's what we always, were taught by my parents, even though they didn't have a chance to go to school. They always instilled the importance of education.
So can you take us back to that day? I mean, that's so extraordinary that you, as a was it a seventh grader, just got up and walked out of your class and left school, which is a pretty bold move. What was going on that day? Walk us through that day. What were you feeling? What were you experiencing? What had happened before that day that led you to feel that way and to make that decision?
I was very frustrated. I was just feeling again very incompetent, like I didn't belong. Like the English part was pretty difficult for me at the beginning. The math wasn't as much because I was pretty good with math, especially I was taking higher level math in Mexico than I was taking here when I came to middle school. So the math part was fine. It was just the English and the word problems that I couldn't really read. And I've always been a little bit of a perfectionist, and if things don't come out well, I'm usually very hard on myself. So I just couldn't take it. I just felt so like a failure. I figured like, you know what, school's probably not for me. Like, English is not gonna be for me, and I'm just gonna see what I can do. So
Mhm.
it was pretty ballsy of me to, get up and leave. And
Mhm.
thinking back, but I think it taught me a lot of like sometimes when you feel like there's no option, you just kind of get centered, but there's always something that you can do to make things better. And it's
Mhm.
having those talks and like starting to reach out for help because I was very independent. Like I
Mhm.
mentioned, my parents, like my dad, I would only see my dad like maybe twice a year for a couple of weeks. So I was kind of have to be like on my own for most of the time.
Mhm.
So I figure at that time that like if this is not working for me, then I just need to get up and leave. I just
And
couldn't take
so,
it anymore.
yeah, and so this was in the Southern California, LA area, right? And so
Yeah.
when you moved there, you're saying that nobody there spoke Spanish. So were there no other Latino students or
There were a few Latino students in my classes. The middle school that I attended, the majority was African American,
mhm,
and because I moved into the city of Compton,
mhm,
and at that time there was a higher population of African American than Latinos. Now it's completely changed. There's more
mhm,
Latinos. There's the majority of the population is Latino population. But
mhm,
so I started making friends. Another thing, I was very introvert, so making friends for me was very
mhm,
difficult. And also, I guess feeling vulnerable and asking for help was also something that I normally wouldn't do.
mhm.
But I had to start making those network connections to be able to survive. So that's when I started asking for help, and then I will have like my personal translator. And there
Okay,
was a group of there was another student like me that he was freshly just came from Mexico, also didn't speak a word of English, and we started
right.
being partners.
Mhm. Yeah, my heart breaks thinking about you coming to this country as a child and not having experience in the language and not getting support and assistance from your teachers in the way that you needed. No, and I know you to be a brilliant person, so there you were with this very, very large brain, and but you weren't getting the support you needed, and so it was creating this intense frustration for you. And just so impressed with your mom for kind of tr- trying to give you the pep talk and remind you that the reason they came was for your education and your siblings' education. What was going on in terms of your living situation? I know you and I have had conversations before, but what was going on? I know that you talked about when you first moved here, the living conditions that you were in. What was happening in regard to your home situation?
Yeah, when we first moved in, my dad used to rent out a room at one of my uncle's houses, and like many of us, like many of our immigrants students, my uncle had a house, but it was like six or seven. It was like about five families living in that house, and it was was supposed to be a single family home, but so he had like two rooms for him and his kids. Then he rented out one room to my dad. Then he had another room in the back that he rented out to another family, and then he had a trailer in the park, a trailer park in the back that he rented to another family, and then he also rented out the garage. And we were all relatives, we were all cousins and friends. So I had to share for the first few months that I lived in Compton. My mom, dad, and my five siblings were in the same room. Like the seven of us had to share the same room. And this went on for a few months until we were able to find a converted garage that had like a one bedroom. and then it was still 7 of us. Eventually, we moved into a 2-bedroom apartment. And then eventually after that, we moved into a house. But, this was progressive into like my older brother started getting older and making more money, be able to help my dad. Because at the time, my dad was making minimum wage. And he had to take care of, 5 kids plus his wife. And we were never hungry. We never had like food insecurity. We never had issues with, being homeless. But it was pretty hard because obviously we didn't have privacy, we didn't have space, and also growing up in the city of Compton back in the 90s, it was a little bit challenging. There wasn't a lot of things that you could do because there was always a fear that you can get shot or you can get robbed. And I'm lucky, happy to say that the city has gotten much better than when I first moved in. I remember when I was walking home from school in the 7th grade. Some folks were talking to me, but I had no idea what, they were speaking to me in English, but I had no idea what happened. And then I got jumped that day. And I was like about 14 years old. So I got beat up. The worst thing is I didn't know what they were saying to me. So I don't know why they were upset at me. I had no idea. And I didn't really have a lot of friends at the time. I was maybe like a few months, in the US. And I didn't really tell my mom what happened. I told her that I was playing soccer and I fell. I didn't want her to worry, but it was very frustrating because I didn't even know how to like defend myself verbally. And I got into the altercation without even knowing what I did wrong. Like I was just walking and like some kids just decided that they wanted to like beat up on me that day.
Mm-hmm. It's extraordinary when I think about the level of violence that boys experience in their life that really doesn't get shared. I think young men and boys experience a lot of violence that is just not talked about because it's considered to be a normal part of life. But that must have been terrifying to you to be assaulted in that way.
Yeah, and one of the things that caused though is I always had to look mean, right? And it was mostly out of protection. So I always had to pretend that I was like that I could harm you because I had to make sure that folks kind of left me alone. And one thing that's interesting about growing up in the city of Compton during that time, I have a cousin whose name is also Leopoldo Villalobos, and we kind of look alike. He's about 5 years older than I am, and we grew up in the same neighborhood. His dad and my dad are brothers. His mom and my mom are like best friends, and he ended up in prison for life. Right? So we had a lot of the same challenges, a lot of the same opportunities, but he ended up in, I guess, what some people would say the wrong side, right? And that always kind of, grounds me because that could be me. I could be that other Leopoldo Villalobos, not who I am today, right? And it's always very daunting because, again, like sometimes people tell you, oh, it's like the choices that you make, but sometimes you don't really have a choice. When you're 14, 15 years of age, you can't just really say, oh, I hate it here, I'm going to move somewhere else. You depend on whoever is taking care of you or whoever your house you're living with. But it was an experience that it always kind of kept me on going. And to a certain extent, because my cousin was involved in gangs and different things, but there were times that gang involvement actually helped me because it provided me with protection, right? Like people didn't mess with me because they knew that was my cousin. So at times I had to tap into those networks because if I wanted to stay in school, if I wanted to like quote unquote be safe, I had to let people know like, hey, Leo, that's my cousin. Don't mess with me. And it's weird, but at the same time, if it wasn't for some of those instances, I wouldn't have been successful to walk through school because you had to walk through different neighborhoods. You cross different gang territories, and even having at the time having the wrong color. My mom would never let me wear red or blue, depending on where I was at, right? So even those things, it was like you had to be mindful about what color you're wearing, what hat you had. My nickname, they call me Polo. It's short for Leopoldo. That's my identity in the hood, right? That's my name. That's what my family calls me. And I used to wear a hat that had a P on it, right? But that's one of the gang's attire that they use. So that got me in trouble.
Wow.
I had to be very conscious about what you wear. You couldn't wear a New York Yankees hat in certain parts of the town. So there's so many things that you have to be aware of. And just kind of like you stop even thinking about it. You just kind of just do them unconsciously.
So I'm curious, you know, you've described it so beautifully about really the choices that you had to make and your cousin had to make in very difficult circumstances where you are kind of under threat from a day-to-day basis, and how you actually benefited from that gang association of your cousin. What was it that, you know, since you brought us to this point in your life where you walked out of school and you were sort of like, I had it, what was it that got you through that? And what do you think were the choices you made that turned you in a different trajectory than your cousin?
One of the things that helped me is that I got switched to a different middle school. So I went to a different middle school, and there I met Mr. Avila, and he was the first person that started kind of like, outside of my mom and dad, that started telling me about, hey, you can go to college, like you have potential, like this is something that you can do.
Mhm.
And he actually organized a college field trip, and he took a group of us to UCLA. That was my first time visiting a college campus. He was an alumni from UCLA, and that's a school that you know, I first visited when I was about 15 years of age. And
Mhm.
that's when I started realizing, like, I like this. I think I want to go to this university, and that was my goal. You know, like I mentioned with you before, I have a very love and hate relationship with UCLA.
Yeah.
um, because that's campus. Out of all the UCs that I applied, it's the only one that rejected me. But my
Darn them,
daughter.
UCLA.
But yeah, they're lost, right?
Absolutely, they're lost.
But my daughter was born with a congenital heart condition, and she had to get surgery. She was born with a hole in her heart. Um,
Yeah.
but she had surgery at UCLA, and
Mhm.
that's where she had a second chance at life. So
Yeah.
just very, very grateful.
Well, and I can imagine that you would take that over getting accepted to
Yeah,
UCLA
yeah,
any day
definitely.
of the
Yeah.
week, right? Yeah, and she's healthy today, right? She's a healthy, she's a
Yeah,
healthy
she's doing
kid.
great. She's awesome. She's gonna be 14 in a few months.
Amazing. Well, she's around the age that you were when you first came to this country then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you said it was really this individual, Mr. Avila, who made all the difference, that you were at a point where you couldn't take it anymore. You were ready to walk out of school. You were living in a home where you had all 7 of your family members in one room. You're in school, nobody's helping you with the language. You've got these pressures from gangs, you know, and there you are, and suddenly Mr. Avila walks into your life, which sounds amazing. Tell us a little bit about him, what kind of a person he was, and the impact he had on you.
Yeah, he was someone that you know I look up to this day. He was just like that cool teacher, right? That knew what to say, knew how to say it. Um, just the way that he carried himself, and it was the first time seeing someone that looked like me, and I think that's what made the big difference, right? Because I could relate a lot to him. Like his story was very similar to mine. He was also someone that came from Mexico, and he kind of showed me that, hey, like this is a possibility. Like you can do what I did. And he was always motivating us. He was always just pushing us to do better. Um, he was always very involved with campus activities, so we will see him everywhere. And he would treat us all with, you know, he would recognize the potential that a lot of his students have. You know, whatever, you know, we were all different, but he knew how to like, really talk to us at our, you know, where we were at, and very empathetic.
Mhm.
And you know, we got a chance to do many activities. During 8th grade, we organized our senior trip to Hawaii. So we went to Hawaii, and we spent a whole week. We had a fundraise the whole year. You know, we did like a lot of popcorn sales and just candy, whatever we could sell during lunchtime. And it was probably one of the best trips that I had. You know, it was a group of about 25 students, and that was my first also time traveling to Hawaii. So you can imagine I was just super stoked to be in the
I
island for a
bet.
week.
I think my senior class went to the zoo, so you definitely did better than my senior class back in the Stone Ages. So, wow, that's amazing. And so Mr. Avila was really that person who saw the potential in you, to do something that you really wanted to do. What was there an experience during that time that showed you that you were starting to see the world in a new way?
Yeah, once I started getting more exposed to college, to the different careers that you can go into, he started bringing in some guest speakers into the classrooms, and a lot of them obviously, they kind of look, they were Latino, they look like me, so just started opening those eyes to the fact that, hey, maybe I don't necessarily need to go into just working after high school, just because one of the things that my mom, and I really also think, I give her a lot of credit for this, like my mom and my dad. My mom was great at getting me jobs.
Mm,
So she talked to a local gardener, and he hired me to go work with him, right? And we wake up like at 5 in the morning, and it was really hard work. And I was, back then I was like 100 pounds. And but she did that on purpose. Hey, like if you don't put in the work in school, this is kind of what has to wait for you. Like, and so she would always find me jobs. I did gardening. I did painting. I was a painter in my young age. She also got me a job at a Pollo Loco. So when I was starting high school, my cousin was regional manager for Pollo Loco, and she hired me to work at the local Compton Pollo Loco. And all those experiences really taught me, like, yes, like I definitely don't want to do this. I definitely want to put in the time and effort in school, because I want to do something that I'm passionate about, especially working at the fast food restaurant. It
mhm,
was definitely a very eye-opening experience. Dealing with customers was a challenge.
mhm,
People were very upset about a lot of things. Some
mhm,
things you felt like they took their day out on you, and
mhm.
I was just a cashier, right? I'm just here to take the
Yeah,
order.
yeah. That's a good reminder for all of us to be kind to the people we interact with, because they're just doing their job. So I love that. I mean, your mom just sounds like this brilliant, amazing, brilliant woman. And like you said, you may not have been rich in terms of money, but you were very rich in terms of love. And I love the fact that she wanted you to have these jobs so you could see what that kind of life would be like. And such a smart, a
Yeah.
smart parent, a smart
And my
parent
dad
who.
did the same thing. My dad took me to work at his job, and his job was even worse.
Mhm,
So I remember going on the summers. He worked in a city called City of Industry here in Los Angeles, and in the summer it's like 90 degrees. And I was working outside, fixing pallets, wooden pallets, and then they gave me the job of cleaning out the building, and it's like a half an acre building. I mean, it was a huge complex, and they gave me like this little hole, like maybe this big, to clean up like a football field worth of weeds and stuff. So
oh
that was
my.
my job for the summer. Needless to say, by the time it was like 3 o'clock, I was like beat. I just wanted to go to sleep, and I did that a couple of summers.
Mhm.
And again, it was just to reinforce me, like, hey, if you don't get an education, you don't become a professional, or start your own business or something that, my dad didn't want us to have the life that he had, right?
Yeah.
He didn't go to school because he didn't have the opportunity to do so. But he also had a lot of other problems. My dad was an alcoholic when I was growing up, but luckily he's been sober over 40 years now. And he
Mhm.
made a choice. He made that choice. He didn't want his kids to follow in his footsteps.
Mhm.
So he's been a great example. Uh, we are very alike, my dad and I, and that's why sometimes we don't get along, because we
Mhm.
are very, we kind of just
Yep,
clash.
that
But
happens.
we're very similar. But I respect my dad. If I can ever be like half the man he is, I'll be happy.
Well, it sounds like an incredible life. I mean, he raised an entire family of 5 children on a minimum wage job. That's, I mean, if you can do that, you are a superhuman, I would say. And so, you told us this incredible story about how your parents really set up this environment for you, and to reinforce the importance of education, and you were fortunate enough to meet Mr. Avila, which opened up even more possibilities. Tell us a little bit about what happened with your siblings. Like, where are they now after having all of this love and this focus on education?
Yeah. So we're all very lucky. My parents were always telling us that we don't have to worry about pitching in for rent, bills, or anything. Like our job was to go to school, and we had that luxury that a lot of our students don't have, right? So my dad provided us that opportunity, so much so that like my oldest brother has a PhD from mathematics at USC.
Wow.
My sister is a psychologist. My little sister is a teacher, and I have a master's in public policy.
Mhm.
And all of this is just thanks to my parents, really, because they sacrificed so much for us to be able to have that opportunity. And I think our parents live vicariously through us because my mom wanted to go to school, but again, her dad didn't let her go past second grade.
Mhm.
And then my dad just couldn't because he had to take care of his siblings when grandpa was killed. So he had to become the dad of the family. But it was just very inspirational. My brother was one of the biggest, like he was the first one in our entire family, like in our whole history of like the Villalobos to have a college degree.
Mhm. That's
He started at
extraordinary.
the community college. Yeah.
Extraordinary
Mhm.
story of achievement and accomplishment through difficulty, really, because of your parents' dedication and belief. That's amazing. They should be giving workshops on parenting because that is really, truly extraordinary. I'm so impressed by your entire family's accomplishments. So here you are. You made it through that struggle. You ended up going to college. You ended up getting your bachelor's degree and your master's degree, as you said, in public policy. Where do you go from here? We're going to fast forward to the present. Where do you go? That's been your journey so far. What do you think of as your next journey? Um,
Well, I'm hoping to, make a difference and leave a legacy here at West Valley. Now that I'm here on campus, my goal is to, do what I can to contribute to this great movement that, the college seems to be moving towards.
mhm,
And I'm just super excited. The possibilities are endless at this point. I feel like I still have a lot of growth, a lot of learning to do. This past couple of months that I've been here, I learned so much, but also I realized how much more I need to learn.
mhm,
And just how in general, like the potential, the opportunities, the interactions that I had with some of the students that I met, the staff. I'm just really excited and looking to see what holds. The next chapter for me. It's going to be right now. My focus is to get the TRiO program on the map and people to talk about TRiO and know what TRiO does and see what TRiO can do for the students.
mhm,
I've been part of the TRiO programs all of my professional life. That's what I know, and that's what I've done since I started college.
mhm,
And I really believe in the mission of what the programs do. And if it wasn't for programs like TRiO, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. I was part of EOP when I was in college, and it's very similar to TRiO. And they gave me that opportunity, that push, that helped me accountable to make sure that I was doing what I needed to do. Because once I went out to college, even though my parents always kept pushing for us to go to college, they didn't really have the skill set to be able to advise me on, well, this is what you need to do college. This is how it works. This is where you can pay for your school. You should apply for scholarships. I didn't apply for scholarships because I didn't know I could. Right.
mhm,
I took the SAT once. I think no one told me that I could take it multiple times.
mhm,
I didn't prep for the SAT. I kind of just showed up that day and be like, "Hey, I'm here to take the SAT."
mhm,
And it wasn't in high school. I didn't really have a lot of. I didn't have a college counselor. We had a different, uh, like technical scheduler. I forgot the term that they use. I didn't really have an actual counselor. They were just giving my classes every semester and like or every year.
mhm.
So there wasn't a big push for us to go to college. If anything, I almost ended up going to the Marines.
Wow.
uh, yeah, so I was this close. I had already taken the ASPAC test. I was already designed to be I think a mechanic because for some reason all the brown folks always end up being mechanics based on their scores. But that was right before 9/11, like a couple of years. So if I had enlisted, I would end up going to Iraq.
Wow.
And a few of my cousins and friends ended up going. Like my one of my cousins ended up being he's a lifetime Marine. He's still in the Marines. But I just decided to go to college instead, and
Mhm,
took a different path.
mhm. That's amazing. And And so I think about, do you want to talk a little bit about the TRiO program? Because students are going to be watching this. We're recording this session, by the way.
Yeah.
And we're going to put it on the web for students to be able to watch as part of our Lifting Voices series. Do you want to talk a little bit about the program, since I'm sure students would be interested?
Great. Yeah. With the TRiO program, target students like me, right? First generation students, low income students that have the potential and are interested in graduating from college and going on to higher degrees, bachelor's, master's, PhDs, whatever it may be. It's a movement that started back in the 60s due to the War on Poverty by Lyndon B. Johnson. And it was one of the first programs that started, providing equitable access to students that in the past were marginalized and didn't have access to higher education. So the whole goal was to get more students not only graduating high school, but actually going into professional careers and breaking those cycles, because that's something that I love to see within this 25 years that I work, 21 years that I work with TRiO. Many of the students that I originally worked with back at Compton High School are now, graduates with bachelor's degrees, masters. Some of them have PhD degrees. They're already, exercising their careers, passing on their knowledge. Some of them already have kids, started families, and especially some of them that came from, very similar backgrounds like me. They were low income, with some of them were homeless at the time, and now having a career, having a place that they can call home, having their own families. It's just amazing. And these programs are available throughout the U.S. Almost every state has at least one TRiO program. And it's just, I really believe in the mission of what the program does, and how it works with many partners and many different environments. And it's just such a rewarding part of my life to see all these students graduating. Some of the students that I work still keep in contact with me. And we used to have like annual reunions where we will get together and just celebrate each other and their accomplishments. So I'm hoping, I can establish some of that here at TRiO at West Valley, and just continue that tradition of just lifting each other and giving back, because I think it's something that it's what I'm most passionate about. It's just trying to do the best I can. And I would always tell the students, just do the best you can, be the best that you can do, and then look good while you're doing it, right?
I love it. That's great. Well, I think about, I just sort of am very moved by the fact that you in many ways have become the Mr. Avila for other students, right? You are now embodying that role for them that had such a big impact on your life, and how just amazing that is that you are paying that forward, but also multiplying it by many students, all the students who work in TRiO. So I just want to thank you for the work you do here at the college, and that what you've done with your career. It's really extraordinary and so amazing. And your story is so inspirational to all of us. I think we can all learn from it and continue to be inspired by it. And I would like to now open it up to the group, if you have any questions you'd like to ask Leo. We have about 15 minutes left, and anybody who has a question, you can raise your hand, you can just chime in. Such an impressive and inspiring story that he shared with us, coming from the home in Mexico, where again they were rich in love, but they didn't have a lot of financial resources. And Leo, I have to tell you, I also grew up in a house that for a while we didn't have indoor plumbing. We had a well, and we had basically an outhouse. This was in Korea when I was growing up in Korea. And so you haven't lived until until you've used an outhouse as your regular toilet. Like, you can't, you can never ever complain after that, because you know what life is like not having indoor plumbing, right? But coming from that experience and moving through the immigration experience, the challenges you had in your adolescence with gangs and that kind of violence, and the alienation you experienced, but moving through that to college and beyond is just truly amazing. So impressive.
Yeah. No, thank you. I mean, it was definitely challenging. And I think the saddest part is that there was so much potential that got lost. I just think of all the friends that I had that I lost to either gang violence.
Yeah.
Particularly one of my friends, his name is Dario, and he was very smart. He was super great in math. He actually taught me math, right? And
Wow.
uh, but he was involved in the gang life, and
Mhm.
he didn't want people to know he was smart.
Mhm.
But I would always like work with them and study with him because he was just like a math genius, and
Mhm.
he ended up getting killed.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I had tons of friends that got killed during gang violence or just like senseless shootings.
Mhm.
My One of my best friend's brother, same thing, got shot outside of his house. So I just feel very lucky that I'm still here, I'm still alive,
Mhm.
and I just can't help think about all of those students. And I had a student also. He was from Huntington Park High School, and I just think about because back in my youth, I used to wear the baggy pants. I had a shaved head. I mean, I wore the uniform, right? Because that was the fashion.
Wow.
Yeah, I would look like I guess I would look like a cholo, right? I mean, that's sort of how
Mhm.
I guess people will call me. And I had a student, super smart student, graduated top of his class, 4.0 student, went on to UC Berkeley, and during his first semester or first quarter, he came back during spring break on winter break. He was walking in East LA, and he got shot and killed.
Oh.
And it was just so hard because he was gonna be an engineer. He had all of his dreams,
Oh.
but same thing, just because he looked like a
Yeah.
gangster and somebody approached him
Oh
like,
my
tell him
gosh.
like what gang he's from and just had an altercation and just got shot like point blank. And there's so many stories like him, and it's just so sad. And I lived that personally. I lost count of how many of my friends, and again, just the choices that a lot of them didn't have. I
Mhm.
was part of the soccer team in high school, and out of the 23 people in the team, I was the only one that went on to college after high school. Everybody else
Mm.
either got a job or ended up in prison or died.
Mhm.
I just feel very fortunate that I'm able to do the job that I do. But
Yeah.
sometimes it does get me a little bit depressed to think like, man, like there's so many people that they didn't have it as good as I did. Even
Right.
though it was hard growing up, and even though I had to go through a lot of different things, I just feel fortunate that I was able to get through it. And another thing too, a lot of folks left the community, and I've always been in Compton because I feel like you want to make the positive change here, because if you run away, like at some point it's going to catch up to you, like and I
Mhm.
always felt like, hey, well, you stay here and you try to make the change in your community, not by you leaving, like those that were able to leave, those are maybe some that could have made a change but they chose to leave, and that's okay. But nothing changes and stays the same
Mhm.
unless you try to make changes where you're at. So
Mhm.
I'm very excited to see that the community here in Compton has changed so much.
Mhm.
Now you're able to jog at night, which you couldn't do before.
Wow. Mhm.
You're able to walk your dogs.
Mhm.
There's still some parts that you don't want to go to, just like any city,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But I just seen the change, and just again, I just feel fortunate that I'm able to wake up every day and do what I do.
Yeah.
Sometimes, obviously, it's frustrating and it's hard and going through things, but I just think of all my friends that couldn't make it, and that's
Yeah.
one of the things that kind of helps me go day by day.
Yeah, it's a great reminder to us about the lost potential, that we see with young people getting killed, young people being imprisoned, and the incredible brilliance, just like your friend, being lost. All of that potential to grow up and have a fulfilling and productive life is gone. What kind of message do you like to give to your students? um, that comes out of your past experience and this beautiful, amazing story that you've told us today.
I try to always be very empathetic and understand where they're coming from, because even
Mhm.
though I have my story, it's my story, and everybody has a different story, right? Everybody has different challenges. Everybody has. So I just try to figure out like where they're at, what they need, and
Mhm.
what they're looking for, and just try to listen, right? Because a lot of times our students are not heard, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I just try to lend a ear for them to know that, hey, I'm here for you. I'm not here to tell you what to do, because that's a decision
Mhm.
that you need to make.
Mhm.
But I'm here to listen and just, take it all in and then just give you my advice. But then at the same time, students have to learn how to decide, because I try to do very little hand holding with our students,
Mhm.
because then if I'm not there, once they go on to college or when they go on to the next steps, I'm not going to be there with them. So I
Mhm.
try to
Mm.
help them to be as independent as possible, and
Yeah.
just understanding that, yes, I need you to be independent, but also know that I'm here to help you.
Yeah. Well, that's terrific, and a great point that every student has a different story, and the importance of just hearing them. I love that. That's really, really key. And I know we have a room full of people who do that on a daily basis. They listen to students, they hear their stories. Anybody in the group, do you have any questions or comments or anything you'd like to share? We have about 8 minutes left in the hour. Yes, Jennifer Kay, our wonderful counselor from School of Social Science.
Thank you. And Leo, thank you for sharing your story. I think the power of a story makes a huge difference and for the whole college, not just the students. One question I had is, what was your biggest struggle while going to college, and how did you overcome that challenge?
Um, I think one of the biggest things was also feeling like the imposter syndrome, right? Like I didn't belong. Also because I look very different, right? I remember my friend Raul and I were the only ones in one of my math classes that that were Hispanic, and also we were both bald headed, right? So we just kind of connected right away, because he was from South LA, I was from Compton, and we just linked, and it was another one again that, if you will look at him right away, you will count him off as a gangster or just someone that you don't want to associate with. But he was super smart. He was like really good at math. He had a lot of potential. He started his own businesses after college. He owns like his own insurance company branch. So uh, it was just, it was sometimes it was fun to see like people would cringe at the idea that we were from like South LA and Compton. People would always be like, "Oh, you're from Compton," and I would always get like the same. I kind of would get looked down. Especially, I remember my first English class when my professor thought that I was plagiarizing, because there was no way someone like me could write a paper the way I did, right? uh, so it was just hard, but it always felt like I always had to work twice as hard to prove that I belong. And it was very exhausting, because at some time I just didn't feel like doing that extra work. And I was like, why? Why do I have to work extra hard, right? And there were times that it was, frustrating, because I didn't have a space and place at home to study. I didn't have a car, so I would have to take the metro, which would take like 2 hours to get to Long Beach State. And there was always something going down at the metro, right? Like somebody either getting their shoes taken or getting beat up, or it was always something. So it was always like, you don't know whether when you leave your house, but you don't know if you're gonna come back, kind of thing, right? And it was that was probably the hardest part, just trying to make sense that I belong there. Um, that was my biggest struggle, and I think a lot of our students go through the same issues where they feel like they don't belong. And it's, my goal is to provide them with that sense of belonging and that sense of community.
Well, I would add to that, I think the students who belong here at this college the most are the students who share your story. Those are the students who are, I think, the most important to us, and the most precious to us, and that we are the most committed to supporting and serving. And that I think it's important for students to know that, and for us to tell that to them as often as we can. Those are great tips from you about how you got through that, and the issue of imposter syndrome, which is a very, very common, I think, issue that we have to help students with, undoing that thinking.
Yeah, but one thing that, that one of the meetings that we had, and I forgot who mentioned it, but someone saw the documentary on Netflix about the scandal about people paying their way into Ivy League schools, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, so that kind of made me feel better that, a lot of times folks get into college not because of their merit, but just because like their parents have the money to pay for you to go to that school.
Well, I think also people need to know that, especially those elite institutions, there are many people who are there simply because they're the child of alumni or the child of donors, and it's invisible. You don't know who those people are. And so it really is a rigged system. And I have to say, I think a lot of our higher education system is structurally set up to reinforce an elite class and to reinforce the kind of hierarchy of having an elite class that continues to be elite regardless of merit, right? President George Bush was a C student, and yet he got into, was it Yale? Simply because his father was an ambassador and had given to the university. He would not have gotten in on his own merit. And that is rampant in these elite institutions. And it is really harmful, I think, to our culture, and to then have students like you and others who do have merit and who do earn their way through hard work into the institutions feeling like they don't belong is just, to me, absolutely enraging. Because they are the students who belong there the most, from my perspective. Yeah. Any other, one last question perhaps before we close out? Question or comment, anything anyone like to add? I see things in the chat, all kinds of appreciation for you, Leo. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for your vulnerability, for your inspiration. Your story mirrors many of our students' stories. And thank you for sharing the arc of growing up in your career. It's a privilege to learn about you and your family. It really has been, I have to say, Leo, a true gift that you are giving to this college and to the students by sharing your story, because stories have immense power to inspire and to uphold people who feel like they don't belong, or that they are on the sidelines, or that people don't understand. And it's important for those of us who are outside that story to hear that story and learn and develop the kind of empathy that our students deserve, right? And we can't do that without hearing these kinds of stories. So you have given us an enormous gift today. I want, please join me in thanking Leo for this incredible gift he's given us today in his story. We are so excited and proud to have you as a member of the West Valley College family, and so inspired by you and grateful for the work you do. And I hope that many, many students view this video, hear your story, and connect with you around it, because you are an incredibly inspiring person here, not just for your story, but because of the commitment you've made for the work you do. So thank you so much, Leo.
Great, no, thank you. This is the first time that I shared this much about me. So in a way, it's a little liberating, because I think I always, kept to myself, especially some of the harsher things that I have to go through.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been sort of a therapy session. So thank you.
Well, it's been that for us as well. And thank you for being vulnerable and sharing, and including about your daughter. We're so happy to hear that she's doing well as well. And we can't wait till we're back on campus where we can see you in person and get to meet your whole family.
Yeah, she's living the dream that my parents wish for us. She's the next and the next in line after us. So my parents built the foundation for us to have a good future, and she's a product of that hard work. So.
Yep, absolutely. It's your parents' dream has come true through you and your kids. So wonderful to see. And that's exactly the kind of social mobility that we talk about at the college, of trying to generate and put out into the world. So amazing, amazing. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Grateful also to have this wonderful supportive audience here. And thanks to all of you who will be watching this in the future. Please feel free to reach out to Leo anytime. His information is on the web, and we look forward to more conversations. We're already planning our next conversation, which will be in a month, of the Lifting Voices series. Thank you all so much. Take care.